This lesson is on the slope-intercept form of linear equations. I previously taught my students about the direct variation form of linear equations, and that's a good place to start. So if you haven't learned about direct variations, I'll put a link in the upper right-hand corner and you can go watch that. All right, so first of all, linear equation is an equation that models a linear function. Graphs of linear equations may cross the y-axis at any point. Where they cross is called the y-intercept. So first of all, linear equation is telling you that when you graph it, it graphs as a straight line. Easy to remember because just look at the first four letters, L-I-N-E, and it spells line. So linear equations graph as a straight line. And linear equations can be written in different forms. Again, I previously taught, excuse me, my students the form called direct variations. And today I'm going over what's called the slope-intercept form. Now, if you look at the name slope-intercept, those two words tell us a lot about what this form is about. So in this form, to write it, you need to know the slope of the line, and you need to know what's called the y-intercept. And so the y-intercept is simply the point where the line crosses the y-axis. So again, this is the y-axis, and this is your x-axis. So this purple line has a y-intercept of 3. The blue line has a y-intercept of -3. Now, we're not really talking about slope yet, but let me go ahead and mention that. All right, so this is called slope-intercept form. So remember slope, and my students don't know this yet, but slope is also referred to with the letter M. Don't ask me why, but it is. So slope equals M, and you can find the slope by using rise over run. So you pick 2 points on your line, see how far you have to rise, how far you have to run. And another point, a line that leans to the left, like the blue line here, has a negative slope. A line that leans to the right, like the purple line, has a positive slope. The other way that we can find slope is using this formula, y2 minus y1, so the difference in my y values over the difference in my x values. And you want to use this when you don't have a graph, but instead you're given 2 points on the line. So if they give you the coordinates of 2 points on the line, you can use this formula. Okay, so let's go back to rise over run. So if I look at this purple line, so I've got a point here and a point here. Now, if you're picking your own points, you want to make sure that you pick a point that occurs at an intersection in the grid lines, because we know what those values are. You don't want to pick a point like here that's in between the grid lines, because you don't know exactly what the y value of that is. All right, so from this point to this point, I have to rise like this. That's a terrible dash line. And then run like this. And so this is my rise, and this is my run. All right, there's an E in rise. So all you do is count how many blocks you rise. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the rise equals 5, and the run equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So the slope of this purple line, rise over run, I don't know why I wrote a 5 back here. I said 6. The run equals 6. So the rise is 5, the run is 6, and it's positive because the line's leaning to the right. And then we can do the same thing with the blue line. Uh-oh, I reached my dot. So, all right, I'll find my own. So here's one dot here, and then where's another dot? Looks like right there's another dot. So I'm going to do rise over run. So I'm going to see how far I have to go up to get to the next point. And then the run is how far I have to go over. And so the run here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the rise is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5, 6, 7. So the slope of this blue line, rise over run, would be 7/5. And the larger your slope is, the larger this value, the steeper your line is. All right, so slope measures how steep your line is. Okay, so y-intercepts are where they cross the y-axis, and you can find the slope by doing rise over run. All right, so let's move on. So here's what slope-intercept form looks like. Now, for my student, we previously did direct variations, like I said, and direct variations look like this. They were the simplest form of a linear equation. So there was no adding or subtracting. This was called the constant of variation, the K. Well, I mentioned to my students that this K is actually the slope of the line, but in a direct variation, we call it the constant variation. So you'll see that this is really the same thing as a direct variation equation, but it's got something added on at the end here. And really, it could be added or subtracted on here. So it could be plus b or it could be minus b. All right, so the m here represents the slope, which I just showed you how you can get that from a graph. And the b represents the y-intercept. Again, I don't know why they use the letter b. I'm sure if you Google it, there's probably a story there. All right, so one of the things you'll be asked to do is they'll give you an equation, and you need to be able to recognize that this is in slope-intercept form. This is why we learn these different forms of linear equations, because some of them are easier in certain situations. Or in other words, if you know about slope-intercept form, you can look at this and know, oh, okay, this is the slope, and this is the y-intercept. And you can use that information to actually graph the line, which I'm going to show you in a little bit. So I kind of just wrote the answers here, but there is one thing I need to talk about. So the slope is 5. The y-intercept, since this is a minus sign, the y-intercept is -2. So it crosses the y-axis at -2. If this was a plus sign, then it would cross at +2, which there's an example of that here. So on this one, the slope is -1/2. So that means this line's leaning to the left. The previous line was leaning to the right. And the y-intercept is 2/3. That's all you got to do. Pretty simple. All right, so now they're going to give us the slope and give us the y-intercept and ask us to write the equation. This is going to be easy too. So here's my slope, that's m. Here's my y-intercept, that's b. So remember, slope-intercept form is just y equals mx plus b. So I just plug those in. Y equals -4/5 times x plus 7. And that's the answer. So again, if you know about this form, it's really useful. All right, here's another one. They said the slope is 3/2 and the y-intercept is -1. So again, y equals mx plus b. Plug in 3/2 for m. And then b, since it's a negative, put -1. And that's all there is to it. All right, so let's look at graphing. So write an equation in slope-intercept form for the line shown. So we're actually not going to, my next lesson, I'm going to do graphing. This one, we're going to learn how to write the equation from the graph. So what are the two things that we need? Y equals mx plus b. We need to know what m is. That's the slope. And we need to know what b is. That's the y-intercept. So remember, slope we can find using rise over run. For b, all we have to do is look at the picture and see where it crosses the y-axis. Okay. In this first one, let's start with the b. So the b is where it crosses the y-axis. That's right here. And so the b value, the y-intercept, is 2. Easy enough. All right, now let's find the slope. For the slope, we're going to pick 2 points on the line, and we're going to do rise of a run. So again, remember when you pick points that occur at intersections in the grid lines. And the way this line is graphed, you actually can use any of these points. And it doesn't matter. I could use these 2 points. I could use these 2 points. It doesn't matter because they all will simplify to the same thing. So for instance, let's say I did these 2 points. I'd have a rise of 2 and a run of 2. 2 over 2 simplifies to 1 over 1 or 1. If I use these 2 points, I'd have 1 over 1, which is 1. So let's do it right here, just to write this down. So I got a run of 2 and a rise of 2. So the slope is 2 over 2, or 1. And hopefully you're yelling at your computer saying, you missed something. I did miss something. This line leans to the left, so what does that do to the slope? Makes it negative. So the slope of this line is -1. And so then the equation, again, it's just y equals mx plus b. So we're going to have y equals -x. I'm not going to put the 1 because I don't need to. The slope's -1. There's a 1 here that doesn't need to be written, plus the y-intercept, excuse me, which is 2. And there's my equation. All right, so let's do the same thing. So the y-intercept on this one is at -2. So looking at the equation, I know this one's going to be -2. Since this is a negative, it's going to be -2. This one was a positive y-intercept. It was +2. And then let's look at the slope. So there's 1 point. And here's another point we can use. Or we could use that one there or that one there. All right. So we're going to see how much we rise and how much we run. So we rise 2 and run 1. And this one's leaning to the right, so it's going to be a positive slope. So the rise over run is 2 over 1, which simplifies to 2. Plug those in, excuse me, to the equation. Y equals 2x minus 2. All right. So there's a lot of information there. So go back and look over that if there's anything that you weren't sure about. Hopefully this was helpful and useful to you. If so, give it a like and a subscribe. Feel free to leave me any comments. Until next time.